The first thing I noticed wasn't the rubble. It was the silence. Arizona nights are never truly quiet. There's always a hum somewhere, the distant hiss of cicadas, the whine of a truck down on Route 17, the gentle rustle of Palo Verde branches in the wind. But that night, as my tires crunched over the final bend into Pinewood Estates, it was as if the desert itself was holding its breath. My headlights swept across a corner lot I knew better than the back of my own hand. My grandmother's house, a squat brick ranch that had stood stubborn against 6 decades of monsoons and droughts. But instead of dusty brick walls and the outline of her front porch, the light fell over something jagged, shapeless. I stopped in the middle of the street. The porch swing was gone. The saguaros she'd planted when Eisenhower was president gone. The kitchen window, where she used to wave me in for breakfast, gone. In their place was a heap of twisted copper, splintered drywall, and broken memories still smelling faintly of diesel and powdered cement. The pale moonlight turned the pile into a carcass, still warm from whatever had killed it. And then I saw her. Delilah Thornfield, HOA president, real estate predator, dressed in a white suit that looked like it had been cut from snow and tailored for cruelty. Her heels clicked against the cracked driveway like a metronome of malice, a silver clipboard tucked under her arm, as if she were here to conduct an orchestra instead of standing over a crime scene. She looked up and smiled the kind of smile a shark gives just before it bites. "Marcus," she purred, as though she'd been waiting for me. "Emergency demolition. Structural hazard. You understand." I didn't answer. My throat was locked shut. The funeral program for my father's service was still sitting in the cup holder beside me, its folded edges damp from my hands. I'd flown to Baltimore 10 days earlier to watch him fade away in a hospital bed, one of those rooms that smelled like lemon disinfectant and resignation. This was supposed to be my first night home. Instead, I was staring at the corpse of my inheritance. Delilah tilted her head toward the rubble like she was showing off a remodel. Best to remove the danger before anyone gets hurt. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles popped. She knew exactly what she was doing, but I also knew she wouldn't have the guts to say it outright. People like Delilah never said the thing. They just left you with enough implication to feel the cut without ever seeing the blade. It wasn't the loss of the building that stunned me. It was the way she stood there. No apology, no hesitation, just confidence carved in her posture, as if this destruction was a community service. I took one slow step toward her, and that's when I noticed something small, almost hidden in the black shadow of the neighbor's palm tree. A red light, blinking. The security drone, the one I'd installed months ago after kids tagged the mailboxes down the street. It was motion-activated, solar-powered, and automatically uploaded footage to a police-run community watch server. I had forgotten it even existed. Delilah hadn't. Or rather, she'd forgotten it existed, which meant that whatever had happened here, the bulldozers, the trucks, the men tearing my grandmother's house apart, it was all there, every frame, in high definition, preserved beyond her reach. The thought should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Not yet, because I knew something Delilah didn't know I knew. She had been circling this property from the moment I moved in. I'd met her the week I finished installing my solar array. Arizona heat can cook you from the inside out, but I was on the roof anyway, tightening the last brackets, sweat running down my neck. That's when the sound of deliberate footsteps rose from my driveway. Click, click, click. She didn't bother with introductions before handing me a cream-color violation notice that smelled faintly of perfume and superiority. Unauthorized exterior modification, it read. Solar panels, I told her, wiping my hands on my shirt. Filed with the city. Permitted. Legal. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They're disruptive to the visual harmony of the community, Mr. Delqua. The board will need to review. That was the first time I felt it. The quiet certainty that this woman didn't see neighbors. She saw pieces on a chessboard. 3 weeks later came the fines. $50 a day. Then compliance options delivered in meetings that felt more like corporate interrogations than neighborhood gatherings. It wasn't about the panels. It was about pressure. Squeeze until someone sells. It worked before. It would work again. Except she'd made a miscalculation. A cough startled me from my thoughts. It wasn't Delilah. It was Cornelius Washburn, my neighbor across the street. Retired paralegal. Sharp eyes behind thick glasses. He stood just inside the beam of my headlights, one hand tucked into the pocket of his windbreaker, the other clutching something flat and rectangular. A manila envelope. He crossed to me slowly, as if each step was a decision. "You need to see this," he said under his breath. I glanced toward Delilah. She was busy tapping notes in her phone. Cornelius's voice dropped to a whisper. "That drone of yours? It caught everything. Not just tonight. Everything she's been pulling for months." The word everything hung between us like the smell of scorched wood still clinging to the air. I took the envelope, the cardboard warm from his hand. "Marcus," he said, eyes fixed on Delilah, "you're not just looking at a demolition. You're looking at the first crack in the dam." He turned and walked back toward his porch without another word. I looked at the rubble one last time, then at Delilah Thornfield, who still thought she was untouchable, and then at the red light blinking in the shadows. For the first time since I pulled onto the street, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like the kind of silence that comes right before the storm. I didn't sleep that night. The hotel room I'd been staying in since my father's funeral felt smaller than usual, the walls leaning in with the weight of everything I'd just seen. My grandmother's house wasn't just gone. It had been erased with surgical precision. The demolition crew hadn't left a single wall standing, not even the chimney. It was the kind of thoroughness that doesn't come from panic or safety concerns. It comes from intent. The manila envelope Cornelius had given me sat on the desk like it was breathing. I promised myself I wouldn't open it until morning, but at 2:47 a.m., the seal tore under my fingers. Inside, a portable hard drive, a sheaf of printed screenshots, and a yellow sticky note in Cornelius's handwriting. "Back up yourself before she does." The first file on the drive was a video. Drone footage. Timestamp. 2 days ago, 6:02 a.m. A white BMW, sliding into my driveway like it belonged there. Delilah stepping out in heels, pointing at my front porch, speaking to 2 men in orange vests. Her voice, clear through the drone's directional mic. "Start with the panels. We'll keep the coppers separate." They didn't knock. They didn't even glance at the condemnation notice, still taped to my front door. Within 5 minutes, my roof was swarming with workers stripping every solar panel I'd spent months installing. The next clip was later that morning, a yellow excavator nosing into the side of my living room wall. I could see my grandmother's quilt still hanging over the couch, just before the wall gave way and swallowed it into dust. I watched every second, jaw clenched until it ached. The next morning, Cornelius came by my hotel. He carried a thermos of coffee and the same unhurried demeanor of a man who'd been through more courtrooms than grocery stores. "She's been doing this for years," he said, setting down his cup. "Not the demolitions exactly, but the game. Manufactured violations. Pressure until the owner sells cheap. And wouldn't you know, her real estate firm just happens to buy the property. You have proof." Cornelius's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I have enough patterns to make a quilt, and I've started sewing." He explained the corner lot trick: prime positions in the neighborhood, better visibility, higher resale value. Out of 247 homes in Pinewood Estates, 23 were corner lots. In the last 4 years, Delilah's firm had purchased 11 of them. Always the same script: violation notices for petty or fabricated offenses, daily fines, refusal of reasonable extensions, a generous cash offer when the owner was tired, broke, or both. "People think HOAs are about lawns and paint colors," Cornelius said. "But in the wrong hands, they're extraction machines. Every fine is leverage. Every rule is a weapon." I leaned back in my chair. "So you're telling me she demolished my house because she wanted my lot?" "She demolished your house because you didn't scare easy," he corrected. "And because you have something she can't stand, legal standing and enough stubbornness to use it." I decided to pay Delilah a visit. She lived in one of those modern stucco fortresses the desert hadn't yet decided to reclaim. The kind with a front door big enough to fit a small car through. I didn't knock. I just stood on her front walkway until she opened it. She was already smiling. "Marcus, I was wondering when you'd stop sulking and come talk to me. You bulldozed my house. She tilted her head like she was considering a wine selection. The city deemed it unsafe. My hands were tied. I saw the footage. That smile froze. Not much, just enough for me to see the crack. What footage? Drone, I said. Recorded the whole thing. Already uploaded to Phoenix PD servers. The air between us shifted. Her eyes narrowed, but her voice stayed sweet. You should be careful with accusations, Marcus. People might start thinking you're unstable. Grief does strange things. I let the silence sit for a beat too long. So does greed. Her nails tapped against the doorframe. You're out of your depth. Walk away, take the settlement I'm offering, and start over somewhere else. This isn't a fight you can win. I didn't reply. I just turned and walked back to my truck, my pulse thundering in my ears. 2 days later, I met Trevor Morrison. Cornelius had introduced us over coffee at the community center. Trevor was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with the restless energy of someone who never stopped thinking 3 moves ahead. Lost my home office to her 3 years ago, he said, shaking my hand. City-approved permits, everything legit. She called it an unapproved structure. I fought for 6 months. Fines piled up. I sold before the debt drowned me. You kept records? Trevor's grin was sharp. Digital forensic records. Every notice, every email, every payment transfer. Plus, I've been mining the HOA's own online archives. Delilah's not as good at covering her tracks as she thinks. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of transaction logs. Properties sold to her firm at 20 to 40% below market, then resold within months for massive profits. In several cases, the city code enforcement officer signing the condemnation notices was the same, Bradley Hutchkins. Trevor leaned forward. Guess who manages his rental properties? Delilah's firm. The dam wasn't cracking anymore. It was starting to roar. That night, I sat in my truck outside the ruins of my grandmother's house, the air smelling faintly of creosote after a light rain. I could hear the faint hum of the drone in the palm tree above. I opened my laptop and began drafting emails, not to lawyers yet, but to the kind of people who understood pressure. The Arizona Real Estate Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, and a local investigative journalist named Sofia Guerrero, whose HOA exposés had made her a pariah among every board president in the county. I didn't know exactly where this was heading, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Delilah's smile be the last word. As I typed, the wind shifted, carrying the sound of distant tires on wet asphalt. A white BMW rolled slowly past, headlights off until it reached the next intersection. It didn't stop, but I knew she'd seen me. 3 days later, Cornelius called. His voice was low and urgent. They've set up cones in front of your place. Saturday morning. Heavy equipment. My stomach sank. For what? Clean up, he said. Hazmat crew. At least, that's what the paperwork says. But I don't see respirators. No suites. Just regular dumpsters. Asbestos. My grandmother's kitchen tiles dated back to the 60s. If they were dumping that without proper disposal, it wasn't just illegal, it was a federal crime. I threw the truck into gear and drove straight there, the rain-slick streets blurring under my headlights. The lot was lit by portable work lamps, throwing long shadows across the skeletal remains of my home. For men in jeans and dust masks were shoveling broken tile into a dumpster stencil construction waste. Delilah stood nearby, clipboard in hand, directing them like a maestro. When she saw me, her expression barely changed, but her voice carried across the lot. Marcus, you're interfering with official remediation. You could be liable for... I held up my phone, already on with the EPA. Her mouth opened, then closed. The crew hesitated, shovels frozen midair. Somewhere in the distance, I heard sirens. That was the night I realized this wasn't just about my house or her greed. It was about the kind of people who believe they can bend the law until it fits their grip, and the moment they find out it cuts back. The dam was going to break, and when it did, it was going to take her whole empire with it. The EPA didn't arrive with a siren. They arrived like a slow-moving storm. 2 white trucks, no decals, just government plates, and a kind of quiet authority that made the cleanup crew freeze. Agent Patricia Valdez stepped out first, pulling on gloves like she'd done this 1,000 times. Her partner began photographing everything: the tiles, the dust clouds hanging in the beam of the work lights, the dumpster with no hazard markings. Delilah was still standing there when Valdez walked over. Who authorized this disposal? Delilah's answer was syrup sweet. The HOA board. We're acting in the community's best interest. Valdez cut her off with a flat look. Ma'am, asbestos disposal requires federal clearance. Everything stops now. The crew dropped their shovels like they just realized they'd been holding snakes. I should have felt triumphant, watching Delilah's mask slip, but instead, I felt something else. A slow, dangerous thought. This is bigger than her. This isn't just about my house or even Pinewood Estates. This was a pattern, a system. By the next morning, I was sitting in Cornelius's kitchen, the blinds drawn, laptop screens glowing in the dim light. Trevor was there too, his fingers drumming on the table as he flipped through printouts. I've been digging deeper, Trevor said. Turns out this corner lot thing, it's not just here. She's got ties to 2 other HOAs across the valley. Same playbook. Manufactured violations, forced sales, quick flips, millions in profit. Cornelius pushed a mug of coffee toward me. You know what that is? RICO territory. Racketeering. The word landed in my gut like a lead weight. I'd been in enough Navy briefings to know what it meant when you stopped fighting skirmishes and started targeting the war machine itself. Problem is, Cornelius continued, you can't go after a racket without allies. And Delilah's got friends, the kind with city badges and long memories. That was the first moment I hesitated. Not because I doubted the evidence, but because I understood what going forward would mean. This wouldn't be a neat courtroom drama where truth wins on its own merit. It would be ugly, drawn out, the kind of fight where you lose pieces of yourself along the way. I looked at Trevor. You lost your house. Cornelius, you've lived here 30 years. I can walk away, but you too. If this gets personal, Trevor leaned forward, his voice steady. It's already personal. She's counting on us being too scared to link arms. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Marcus Delqua, a man's voice said. Yes, this is Rico. I was on that cleanup crew. We were told it was legal. But yesterday, that was no accident. She knew about the asbestos. She told us not to worry because she had it covered. You'd testify to that. Long pause. If it keeps her from doing this to anyone else, yeah. The call lasted less than 2 minutes, but when it ended, I knew the dam had shifted again. It wasn't just my evidence now. It was witnesses. 3 nights later, the real twist came. I was in the hotel parking lot, unloading groceries from the back of my truck when I heard glass shatter. My first thought was some drunk had dropped a bottle. But then I saw it. The rear window of my truck, spiderweb from a brick that now sat on the pavement. There was paper tied to it with duct tape. Leave, or next time it's you. Something in me snapped. Not fear exactly, but the cold clarity I remembered from deployment, the moment you stop thinking about odds and start thinking about objectives. I picked up the brick and walked straight to my room, set on the table, stared at it until the desert sun faded and the parking lot lights flickered on. By the time my phone rang, I was ready for anything. It was Cornelius. His voice was tight. She's escalating. All 4 of my tires slashed. And Marcus, there was a dead javelina in my mailbox. With a note. What did it say? Mind your business or join Harold. Harold Patterson, his neighbor. The one who'd fought Delilah over a workshop violation and died of a heart attack during the stress of the court battle. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Cornelius said, "We've got to hit her now," before she decides to push further. The next morning, we met with Sophia Guerrero. In person, she was sharper than her broadcasts. Short hair, no-nonsense eyes, and a notebook that seemed to catch every word you didn't mean to say. "Your story is bad enough to make headlines," she said after we laid out the evidence. "But your pattern? That makes it a series. And your witnesses? That makes it dangerous for her, not you." She sketched a timeline across her notepad. Demolition, cleanup, asbestos, violation patterns, property flips, connections to Hutchkins. Then she underlined 2 words, public pressure. "You've got the law on your side," she said, "but that takes months. The court of public opinion? That can move in days. If she loses her protection before she knows she's in a fight, she's finished." Cornelius leaned back. So we go loud. Sophia smiled. We go nuclear. The plan was simple in theory. Secure every piece of evidence. Multiple backups, including off-site encrypted storage. Contact every victim in Pinewood Estates and the other HOAs. Bring them together. Release a first wave of the story with the most undeniable facts. Drone footage, bank transfers, property flip data. Nothing she could spin as rumor. Time the release to coincide with formal complaints to the Real Estate Commission, the EPA, and the State Attorney General. Execution would be anything but simple. We started with the victims. Mrs. Patterson, still tending her late husband's workshop like he might walk in any minute. The Jenkins family, who'd moved 2 towns over after fines swallowed their savings. Trevor reached out to others, his tech background letting him find phone numbers hidden behind LLC registrations and outdated directories. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Elderly couples forced to sell. Young families buried in fines. Each thought they were alone. When we told them they weren't, the air changed. It was late, near midnight, when I finally got back to my hotel. The air was heavy with the smell of rain on hot asphalt. I was unlocking my door when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A video link. I tapped it. Grainy night vision footage. My property, or what was left of it. A crew, working under portable lights, loading debris into unmarked trucks. Not cleanup, not demolition. This was evidence being erased. And in the corner of the frame, a familiar silhouette in a white blazer. Delilah. She turned toward the camera once, as if she knew it was there, smiled, and pointed at the drone. I called Trevor immediately. He pulled the footage from our backups before the link expired. She thinks this is intimidation, he said. What she doesn't realize is that she's just committed federal obstruction of justice, and did it on tape. It wasn't fear I felt then. It wasn't even anger. It was something far more dangerous for her. Resolve. The hunter had just looked straight at the prey, and realized too late that the prey was watching her back. Sophia moved faster than I expected. By dawn, she'd turned our spreadsheet chaos into a clean, brutal narrative, one that read less like an HOA dispute and more like the outline for a federal indictment. The first article went live at 6:12 a.m. Drone footage shows HOA president overseeing demolition without permit. The headline alone was gasoline. By noon, the story had been shared over 12,000 times. By evening, Delilah's name was trending locally with words like bribery and fraud attached. The phone calls started that night. First, a woman from a neighboring subdivision. She did the same thing here, told my husband our shed was illegal. Find us until we sold. You need my documents? Then, a man in Suncrest Hills. We've been fighting her cousin's HOA for months. Same pattern. I can send bank records. It wasn't a ripple effect. It was a chain reaction. 3 days in, Delilah struck back. She didn't go to court. Not yet. She went for the rumor mill. A whisper campaign, the oldest, dirtiest tool in a small-town arsenal. Suddenly, I was a dangerous veteran with PTSD who threatened elderly board members. Cornelius was embezzling from the HOA. Trevor was running an extortion racket with fake violation notices. None of it was true. All of it traveled faster than facts. Mrs. Henderson, who had always waved from her porch, avoided my eyes in the grocery store. 2 potential clients canceled solar installations without explanation. My sister called from Baltimore, worried after someone messaged her that I was headed for prison. I've been in war zones where you knew exactly who was on your side. This was worse. The battlefield was invisible, and so were half the attacks. Cornelius tried to keep me focused. Smear campaigns are just noise, he said over coffee one morning. The truth still exists, and we've got it. We keep hitting her with facts, she'll run out of places to hide. Trevor was less patient. Noise or not, she's turning your life into a liability. If the wrong people believe her first, the facts won't matter. They were both right. And that was the problem. The turning point came with an unmarked envelope slipped under my hotel room door. No return address. Inside, a single flash drive and a folded piece of paper. Watch before she does. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting a virus. What came up instead was shaky cell phone footage, taken from inside a dim parking garage. The grainy image resolved into two figures, Delilah and Bradley Hutchins. She handed him a manila envelope. He handed her a signed document. Even without sound, the exchange screamed deal. But then the mic caught fragments. Expedite this, professional courtesy, cash payment. It was bribery, clear as daylight, and in a place she must have thought was safe. I sent the file to Sophia immediately. Her reply came in less than a minute. This is the kill shot. Protect it. But before we could use it, Delilah made her boldest move yet. She filed a defamation suit against me, Cornelius, Trevor, and Sophia. It was pure theater, the kind of case designed not to win in court, but to tie you up in legal mud until you drowned. Her attorney, a slick operator named Richard Blackstone, gave a press conference calling me a bitter man exploiting his military service to avoid responsibility and labeling Sophia a tabloid reporter who can't tell fact from fiction. It should have scared me. Instead, it gave me the same cold clarity as that brick in the parking lot. Because in filing the suit, they'd just made a catastrophic error. They'd have to turn over evidence to prove her innocence. Evidence we'd been trying to subpoena for weeks. 2 days later, Trevor came into our war room, Cornelius's dining room, with a grin that made him look years younger. They just gift-wrapped us their records, he said, dropping a stack of scanned files onto the table. 3 years of HOA transactions, property flips, board meeting minutes, bank transfers, all the stuff she's been hiding. Cornelius flipped through the pages like he was reading the ending of a novel he'd been chasing for decades. This is it. This is the backbone. Every illegal fine, every fraudulent sale, every dollar she siphoned from the HOA fund. I just stared at the pile. Somewhere, and there was the moment my grandmother's home went from a house to a Target. The next week was a blur of building pressure. Sophia prepped the second part of her series, the one with the bribery footage. Cornelius drafted coordinated complaints for every victim. Trevor locked our evidence into triple redundant cloud storage, in case anyone gets cute. We all knew she'd hit back again. The only question was how. The answer came at 3:14 a.m., in the form of a pounding on my hotel door. It was the night manager, pale as his shirt. "Sir, your truck. You should come." The windshield was gone. Every panel keyed with slurs in red spray paint. In the bed, a dead hawk lay on its back, wings spread, a piece of cardboard tied to its talons. "Stop." By morning, Agent Valdez had the hawk in an evidence bag and a promise that the FBI was now very interested in Delilah's extracurricular activities. But I was feeling the strain. Nights were short. Days were a constant churn of meetings, interviews, and the background hum of fear. Not for me, but for the people around me. Cornelius was in his 70s. Trevor had a family. Sophia's career was now tangled in the same net I'd thrown over Delilah. The closer we got to breaking her, the more I wondered if we were ready for what would happen when she broke. Then came the meeting that set the stage for everything. City Council announced an emergency public session to discuss allegations of systemic HOA misconduct. It was unusual, and more importantly, it was open to cameras. Sophia's eyes lit up when she heard. This is it. Public record. She can't hide behind lawyers if she loses her temper on live TV. Cornelius leaned toward me. "We bring everything. Drone footage, bank records, the bribery tape. Lay it all out where she can't bury it." Trevor added, "And if she tries to deny it, we drop the parking garage footage right there." I thought about the night I'd pulled onto my street and seen only rubble where my home had been, about the red light blinking in the palm tree, about the way she'd smiled, thinking I was powerless. "No half measures," I said. "If she's going down, she's going down in the open." The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the things you can't get back. The smell of my grandmother's kitchen after Sunday baking, the way the light fell through the front window in late afternoon, the creak of the porch swing. But I also thought about what could be built in their place, and how sometimes the only way to rebuild is to burn the rot down to its roots. By sunrise, the decision was made. We weren't just going to confront her. We were going to make sure the whole city saw exactly what she was. The siege was over. The storm was about to break. The Phoenix City Council chambers had never felt like this before. The air buzzed with a nervous, electric hum, as if everyone could sense something about to rupture. Every seat was full, the aisles crowded, the spillover room down the hall streaming it live. From my front row seat, I could see the dais, the microphone that would carry my words into the public record, and the two cameras, one local news, one Sophia's, aimed directly at the witness table. Behind me sat Cornelius, Trevor, Mrs. Patterson, and a dozen other victims, each clutching violation notices, property deeds, or photographs of what they'd lost. Council Chair Robert Martinez's gavel came down once. We are here to address serious allegations regarding Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association and related city code enforcement practices. Mr. Marcus Delqua, you have the floor. I stood, palms flat on the table, the weight of the moment pressing into my spine. 18 months ago, I inherited my grandmother's home. Last week, I came back from my father's funeral to find it reduced to rubble. I was told it was condemned for safety reasons. But my security drone recorded something else entirely. I clicked the laptop. The first clip played on the monitors mounted to the chamber walls. Delilah stepping out of her white BMW, pointing at my roof, her voice crisp through the drone mic. Start with the panels. We'll keep the coppers separate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I kept going. Bank records appeared on screen. HOA funds transferred to Delilah's personal account, the same day as my demolition. Property sales, 23 corner lots in 4 years. All sold under financial duress. All flipped for massive profit by her firm. This isn't about solar panels, I said. It isn't about community standards. This is about theft, fraud, and the abuse of power under the cover of HOA rules. That's when the chamber doors slammed open. Delilah Thornfield swept in like she owned the place. White suit, hair perfect, flanked by 2 lawyers I didn't recognize. She didn't wait to be acknowledged. Mr. Chairman, I demand the right to respond to these malicious lies. Martinez looked to me, then back to her. Ms. Thornfield, you will have your turn after. She stepped past the rail, eyes locked on me. This man is a bitter, unstable veteran who can't accept responsibility for his own code violations. Her voice rose, brittle with fury. He's using his military service to intimidate board members and smear my name. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Even her lawyers seemed to wince. I didn't move. Instead, I clicked the next file. The monitors lit with grainy parking garage footage. Delilah handing Hutchkins an envelope, taking signed documents in return. Expedite this, professional courtesy, cash payment. The reaction was immediate, a low murmur swelling into voices. One of the council members leaned forward, visibly pale. Delilah's face went taut. That's taken out of context. The final clip hit like a hammer. It was from a night she'd returned to my property under the work lights, pointing at the drone, smiling as debris was loaded into unmarked trucks. Agent Valdez's voiceover, recorded later, explained what was happening. Federal obstruction of justice during an active environmental investigation. Silence. Then a cough somewhere in the back. Delilah turned to her lawyers, but neither looked at her. She spun toward the council. This is a witch hunt. I've protected property values for years, and you're letting this. She stopped, caught herself before another slur could fall out. But it was already too late. The mask was gone. From the back of the room, Agent Patricia Valdez began walking down the center aisle, her credentials held high. Ms. Thornfield, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a clean blade. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, bribery of a public official, obstruction of justice, and federal environmental crimes. Gasps became shouts. Camera flashes strobed against the wood panel walls. You can't do this to me, Delilah screamed, even as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. I know people. I have friends in the planning department. You'll regret. That's another confession, Valdez said calmly. The crowd erupted, half in shock, half in applause. Martinez's gavel was lost in the noise. I stood there, hands still on the table, watching the woman who had demolished my home and dozens of lives be walked past the people she'd treated like pieces on a chessboard. Her heels scraped against the marble floor in an uneven rhythm, no longer a metronome of control, but the shuffle of someone being led away. As she passed my row, our eyes met. There was no more smile, no shark's glint, just the flat, cold realization that her game was over. Agent Valdez paused at the door, turned back toward the chamber. Every victim of Ms. Thornfield's actions will be contacted by federal investigators. If you have documentation, now is the time to come forward. Behind me, Mrs. Patterson began to cry. Not the quiet grief of loss, but the shaking relief of someone who's been waiting years to be heard. Cornelius put a hand on her shoulder. Trevor leaned forward, recording everything with a steady grip. I took a breath, stepped to the microphone one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, you just saw a confession, an arrest, and the truth. Some people think HOA rules are about keeping lawns trimmed and mailboxes painted. But in the wrong hands, they're weapons. Today, we took one of those weapons away. The applause that followed wasn't loud at first. It was slow, deliberate, the kind that builds. By the time the council adjourned, the whole room was on its feet. Outside, the desert air felt sharper, cleaner. Reporters crowded in, microphones and cameras thrust forward. Sophia stayed close, directing them toward the victims, letting the story expand beyond me. Cornelius came up beside me, his expression unreadable. "You realize this isn't the end," he said. "It's just the part where the walls start coming down." "I know," I said, watching as Valdez's unmarked SUV pulled away with Delilah inside. "But sometimes you have to bring the walls down before you can see the sky." The flash of the drone's red light from the night of the demolition flickered in my memory. Back then, it was just a piece of equipment. Now, it felt like the first spark of a fire that had burned all the way to this moment. The city was still buzzing behind us. Ahead, the road stretched into the desert, washed gold by the setting sun. For the first time since I'd driven back into Pinewood Estates, I felt the weight on my chest start to lift. We hadn't just stopped Delilah. We made sure everyone saw it happen. 6 months later, the lot on the corner of Ocotillo Drive didn't look like a scar anymore. Where rubble once lay baking under the desert sun, a new home stood, low, angular, built for the climate. Steel and adobe blended into the Palo Verde trees, the roof lined with a new bank of solar panels that gleamed in the morning light. Hummingbirds darted between desert sage blooms in the front yard. The smell of creosote hung in the air after a dawn rain. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the mountains. This time, there was no white BMW idling at the curb, no clipboard, no shadow waiting to pounce. The legal process had been brutal, but it worked. Delilah pled guilty to a stack of federal charges: wire fraud, bribery, obstruction of justice, environmental crimes. 18 months in federal prison. Permanent revocation of her real estate license. Restitution for the victims. Bradley Hutchkins lost his pension and served 8 months in county jail. Rico's demolition company was fined heavily and forced into EPA compliance training. The HOA board was gutted. 87% voter turnout replaced every seat. Cornelius became president. Trevor took over the architectural committee, and Mrs. Patterson, at 73, ran unopposed for treasurer. One of Cornelius's first acts was to mail refund checks to every homeowner fined under Delilah's watch. $67,000 went back into people's pockets. The ripple effects were bigger than we'd imagined. Sophia's investigation didn't just stay local, it went national. Lawmakers took notice. Arizona passed new HOA accountability laws, mandatory conflict of interest disclosures, annual audits, and real penalties for board members who abused their power. 3 other states adopted similar bills within the year. The corner lot itself became more than a home. I built it with every lesson the last year had taught me. Rain catchment system, battery backup, native landscaping, a demonstration of what could be done when you built for people, not profit. The front porch looked out over a small community garden where neighbors gathered at dusk. The garden had started in an empty lot where Delilah's foreclosed house used to sit. Mrs. Patterson planted the first row, sunflowers in memory of her late husband Harold. Trevor's kids built a compost station. Cornelius brought desert-hardy tomatoes from his backyard. It grew from there, row by row, until it became a place where people stayed to talk after planting. The kind of place where if you looked closely, you could see the stitches pulling a community back together. The scholarship was Trevor's idea, but we all funded it, partly from Delilah's seized assets, partly from donations after the news coverage. The Marcus Delqua Renewable Energy Scholarship went to veterans pursuing degrees in sustainable technology. In its first year, it sent 9 people to college. By the second, it was 17. At our first award dinner, I stood on a stage in the community center, looking out at rows of faces, young, determined, ready to build something better. I told them the truth. The best revenge is proving they can't destroy you. The best justice is building something they can never take back. The hardest part to explain to people who didn't live it is that justice isn't the same thing as repair. Justice is a verdict, a sentence, a law passed. Repair is slower. It happens in conversations on sidewalks, in a neighbor's hand on your shoulder, in deciding to plant sunflowers where someone tried to plant fear. Repair is Mrs. Henderson waving at me from across the street again. It's Cornelius hosting monthly financial transparency meetings where every resident can see the HOA books. It's Trevor showing a new homeowner how to get their solar permits approved without a single violation notice. The day Delilah went to prison, I didn't feel the triumph I'd imagined. I just felt a quiet kind of finality, like a locked door clicking shut behind her. What surprised me was how little I thought about her after that. She'd taken enough already. I wasn't giving her my attention anymore. One evening in early spring, I walked past the community garden at sunset. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and violet, the kind of colors you only get after rain in the desert. Mrs. Patterson was there, tending the sunflowers. She saw me and smiled, brushing soil from her hands. "You ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't put up that drone?" she asked. "All the time," I said. She nodded toward the garden. "Then I guess we'd better be grateful you did. We still get visitors sometimes, people from other neighborhoods, other states, even other countries coming to learn how we fought back. We tell them the truth. There's no magic trick, just stubbornness, good records, and enough people willing to stand together. When they ask if it was worth it, I tell them this. I wake up every morning in a house they tried to erase, in a neighborhood they tried to hollow out, and I look around at what's been rebuilt. That's worth more than any verdict." The night the garden officially opened, the whole neighborhood turned out. Food trucks lined the street. Kids chased each other between rows of wildflowers. Someone set up a projector against the wall of the community center to play Sophia's documentary. The final scene of the film was the council meeting, the drone footage, the bribery tape, the arrest. Watching it now, I saw things I hadn't noticed at the time. Mrs. Patterson gripping Cornelius's arm. Trevor holding his camera, steady despite the tremor in his hand. My own jaw set like stone. When the credits rolled, there was no applause, just a kind of stillness. The good kind, the kind that comes when you realize you've all lived through something that could have broken you, and didn't. Later, after the crowd thinned, I stood at the edge of the garden, the desert night cool against my skin. The flowers swayed in the wind, their shadows long and soft in the light from the street lamps. Cornelius joined me, hand in his jacket pockets. "You know," he said, "she thought she was demolishing a house." I looked out at the garden, the new home behind it, the people laughing in the distance. Turns out she was planting something. Sometimes I think about the moment I first pulled onto the street that night, the silence, the rubble, the red light blinking in the palm tree. Back then, it felt like the end of something. Now I know better. It was just the sound of a seed breaking open.